Welcome to you, Ngobile. And Iprosa, I don't know who that is, but you're very much welcome. This is the working group 8, the tourism working group's webinar. We firstly want to say thank you very much for having allowed us to postpone our presentation to today. It was a little bit of a challenge to get the presentation ready on time on last week, Friday, and to be able to fit in with the schedule that was provided. So we really thank you very, very much. We also appreciate the admin for having set out the invitation and getting everybody connected. This working group is facilitated by yours truly and with two co-facilitators, Doris Warfel. I hope I pronounce it correctly, Doris.
Yes, it is.
And Nandipa David, that already is, the names are already here. Ah, wonderful. That's actually the trick. Here is Nandipa and Doris. Do show your beautiful face as well. People can see and be jealous that I'm surrounded and working with beautiful ladies. Here we go. That's Doris. And if you want to confirm that you're not speaking to a robot, there is Tulani as well, not as handsome, but there's Tulani. That's me. Dan, I'm not going to compete with the beauty in front of me, so I'm out of here. So thank you very, very much. That's the team. Our administrator is Batando, so that's why I was wondering if she's not going to join us today. It would have been nice to have her join us. I'm not too sure, Ayanda. We were supposed to have some kind of a leader and a facilitator. We were told, and we have seen with the previous webinars, that there is what is the word used? But an experienced apex leader who is supposed to give us the opening address. Are we going to skip that part and we go straight into our presentation?
I think from my side, looking at the trends of the webinars, I feel like the content belongs to the facilitators and co-facilitators of the working group. So it's basically just to get an insight on the draft 3 of the working group. Hence, it's always advisable, you know, for the facilitators and co-facilitators to take the lead. It's just that sometimes, unfortunately, because of clashing schedules, it makes it a bit hard to coordinate, to have everyone present, especially, looking at the
Okay.
postponement and all of that. Yeah, but,
Okay.
let's not take
That's
that
not.
away, because we can
Mm.
still proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's not a problem. I just wanted to know if we can go straight into our presentation. And with that said, can I ask Doris to please share the presentation so we can get on with it straight away?
I'm trying to share the presentation, but I don't see it on my system here. I don't know. Somehow I have some technical issues. Nandi, would you be able to jump in and pin up the presentation? I already tried everything on my side, but for some reason it doesn't show up when I click on share. Not sure what's going on there. Nandi, are you there? Can you maybe assist? Do you have access to the presentation? Or maybe.
Hi, Doris. Sorry, when I was sharing, then my mic went away. But I am sharing. If I can just be
Thank you so
advised
much.
if it
Yeah,
is
thank you
visible.
very, very much. Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is visible.
Now I
Thank you so
need
much.
to, how do I get it? I just need to, without the, oh, sorry. I don't want to share the notes. If anybody knows how I can do that. Oh, this is it. Yes.
Okay. Is it in presentation mode, Nandi?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's good enough. I'm happy for us to proceed on this basis without any further waste of time. So, as indicated, my name is Tulani Nzima. I'm the facilitator with two co-facilitators in Nandi and Doris. So this is the tourism working group 8. We are very happy to share this presentation with you. And Nandi, kindly take me to the first slide. As an executive summary, we want to make the point that tourism is a major driver of global growth, jobs, and investment. Tourism creates a lot of jobs because of the low barriers for entry in this space, and it touches on communities. That's why it has that ability to drive jobs as well as investment. We know tourism is a force for good. So when you do it right, it breaks barriers and so on and so on. But it is also challenged by some systemic failures. And in this case, we would like to highlight 4 of the systemic failures that always challenge tourism, making it difficult for it to achieve the global growth that we are talking about and the jobs and investment that it can do. The first one is inequality. This inequality resides in different areas and it will manifest itself in terms of financial access as well as participation, different global tourism challenges that exist, as well as climate risks. This environment is very susceptible to climate risks. When we have tsunamis, we have tornadoes, aeroplanes cannot fly, hotel facilities cannot operate, and this makes this industry very, very vulnerable and at risk at any given point in time, not due to human failures, but due to climate risks. We have also seen extractive models. And let me explain a little bit about these extractive models and how it has worked in different places. We have seen tourism developers going into different areas and without the involvement of the communities, developing community tourism facilities which are actually not benefiting the communities. We have seen weak community participation as well in various other places. We used to have situations where tourists were traveling in buses, just taking photographs and going into tourism experiences without the involvement of the community. And this has, over time, led into resentment and a misunderstanding of the economic benefits that these communities should actually be getting. So we are now focusing on what the G20, 2025, 2027 leaders should try and achieve. For us, it is important that they focus on inclusive growth and a very low carbon pathways. We will explain this a little bit deeper when we go into the detail. The next slide, Nandi. So there are critical things that we are focusing on. One of them is the fact that there is no lack of policy across the board. There is no lack of a particular convention that will support things that need to be done. But what has been missing is the fact that there is no action. If there is action taken, there are certain benefits that we believe will immediately flow from this. For starters, better jobs, and fair work standards can be developed. When we talk about better jobs, we are talking about quality jobs, not necessarily short-term jobs, but jobs that can be lasting, and fair standards that make sure that the tourism practitioners employ people in an equitable manner, fair payment, and all those kind of things that are to do with the benefit of creating better jobs. And we believe that this can be done. The protection of heritage, biodiversity, and climate goals. So as indicated earlier on, most parts of Africa have got UNESCO declared heritage sites which need to be protected. And if these are not protected, it leads to an erosion in that space. The biodiversity, which has the flora and fauna of a sensitive but scientific interest, also needs to be protected as such. The climate goals, which is about the reduction of carbon emissions, that is something that we are seeing as a benefit if the G20 can take action. It will lead to unlocking sustainable finance and investment pipelines. For as long as the infrastructure in the tourism space is not even, for as long as there is no leadership from the G20, the ability to unlock financial investments becomes very, very difficult because of the uneven and the unequal tourism space out there. And we believe that we can also see the strengthening of local economies, especially rural and coastal. As indicated, tourism creates a lot of jobs, and it does not require people to have extensive university qualifications to be able to play there, but it can be a serious economic benefit in the local communities as long as it is inclusive, especially in the rural areas where most of the heritage and cultural sites reside. The coastal lines are equally a very, very important line with some of the pristine coastlines that we have seen in Africa and the rest of the world. Next slide, please. But there is also a risk if the G20 leadership continues inactivity or not taking decisions. Whilst we have seen the benefits of taking action, what is the risk if no action is taken to deal with the challenges that we have highlighted, to deal with the fact that there could well have been benefits to enhance tourism spread in the rest of the world? If there's no action taken, there will be a deepening of inequality and over tourism conflicts. The over tourism conflicts uh, also find themselves in areas like the national game reserves, the biodiversity spaces where there may be the risk of pushing too much tourism into areas which are sensitive because of biodiversity conservation kind of environment. So we need to make sure that action is taken. If that does not happen, there will be a conflict of those that are preserving biodiversity and conservation and those that are pushing the tourism side. It just continues to happen that way. And we don't want to have the risk of this deepening inequality, which over time creates resentment to tourists. There's also a loss of community trust. Communities need to understand that when they see tourism development in their areas, it involves them and it is their benefit. If we don't do that, there will always be this gulf between those that are driving tourism and those that are in the communities. Tourism in communities must not be seen as an illicit business, elitist business. I'm sorry. It must be seen as something that is part of them. If we don't have that, we have seen in communities, especially here in South Africa, whenever there are developments, projects that are supposed to benefit tourism, communities that are not involved have tended to protest against such and frustrating the investment that is supposed to be supporting those kind of development. We have seen them picketing and blocking roads that lead to tourism facilities. So it is very important that the community trust is embedded in their involvement. The climate shocks that we have seen in some parts, it's a result of a bad infrastructure, but it leads to revenue losses. It's not the same in other parts of the world, but we believe that where there is an imbalance in how tourism standards have been set, the infrastructure will be affected and that there will be serious revenue losses unless the G20 leadership takes action and standardize those climate shocks and prepare for such emergencies. The biodiversity decline that I have spoken about undermines growth and stability for as long as there is no action that is taken. And our view is that we need to make a case for the G20 leadership to begin to focus on the actions that we have recommended, because if no action is taken, these are the consequences that we are going to be facing. At this point, let me invite Doris to come and take us through what has already been identified as is it still me continuing here, Nandi?
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. It's me still talking. So my apologies. Uh, why do we think the G20 must act? It's because the G20 is the only organization or platform that can set global standards, which will result in sustainability, accessibility, and good ethics. These are supported by some conventions in different parts of the world that have been taken already. It can assist in mobilizing blended finance and then the private public sector investment that is very critical in making sure that tourism is supported. It will help in the alignment of the UNWTO, the UNESCO, and the African Union and the World Tourism the Council. These have got conventions. Everything that we are doing here is supported by alignment with the United Nations World Tourism Organization and United Nations UNESCO, as well as the African Union. So this is not in isolation of all those critical things that we are talking about. The G20 must act to advance seamless mobility. There's too much talk of coming up with seamless travel especially in Africa. Europe has already achieved this, but in Africa, the issue of visas has become a bit of a problem. An example of this is the fact that in some countries, the home affairs or homeland affairs have seen the visa fees as a revenue generating stream, but this can be done at the expense of facilitation of tourism. The borders that we have out there with a strict visa facilitation fees and other administrative challenges have affected that seamless mobility and the connectivity, which is specifically with regards to air connectivity, has become a problem. It is very difficult to fly to some parts of Africa because of lack of air connectivity, coupled with the visa restrictions and those border restrictions that are there. There are a few things that could already have been done, but are not done yet, like the implementation of the Yamoussoukro Declaration, which is very, very old now, has become a bit of a problem. The intention of that declaration was to make sure that airlines in the rest of Africa can operate seamlessly together, but it is not happening. We don't have a common visa regime in Africa. We don't even have a common currency system that tourists can use seamlessly. All of these things, ladies and gentlemen, has led to Africa getting less than 5% of global tourism benefits flowing into Africa until now because of these kind of things. And we believe that it is time now that the G20 must act. And then the next slide, maybe this is where I will be introducing Doris, who will take us through the priorities that have been identified and what we as the Tourism Working Group have done to enhance this presentation. Doris, over to
Thank you
you.
so much, Tulani. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, what you see here on this slide is these are the 4 priorities agreed by the G20 Tourism Working Group under the South African presidency and the Ministry of Tourism in May 2025. They remain the foundation of the G20's policy package. The C20 Tourism Working Group so endorsed, we, the 3 of us and our colleagues in our group, endorsed them. And we referred in our document that we drafted to the detailed action tables for full interventions, timelines, and accountability. As Tolani already said, without action, there are no results. And so to move from ideas to action, we matched each priority to a specific G20 forum that can take decisions, set standards, and unlock funding. In our document, we set out concise action plans, lead actors. We indicated timelines from 2025 to 2030 for each priority. And we invite the G20 to adopt clear deliverables, seminars, policy frameworks, and reporting cycles that translate international norms into practical outcomes for destinations, MSMEs, workers, and communities across the G20 and beyond. So I would like now to outline these 4 priorities that were defined by the G20 Tourism Working Group. Our first priority, or their first priority, people-centered artificial intelligence and innovation for MSMEs. Here we have the deliverable and action plan to support startups and MSMEs through AI and innovation. I would like to also outline the actions that we suggest to conduct digital readiness audits for MSMEs across G20 member states, to develop AI analytic toolkits tailored to tourism MSMEs, to a launch of inclusive SME training programs in urban and rural areas. Also to adopt open data and cybersecurity standards for tourism, publish ethical AI guidelines for tourism operators, and address digital access barriers for persons with disabilities, and adopt industry standards for inclusive digital access. We also defined the lead actors and also defined why it matters. But I think that can be read in our document. So the second priority, tourism financing and investment for equality and sustainable development. Here are the deliverables, the G20 seminar on partnerships for tourism financing and investment. The action that would be needed is to conduct national tourism investment diagnostics to identify pipeline projects, create blended finance and public-private partnership platforms, develop gender-responsive and green finance instruments, establish investor MSME matchmaking mechanisms, and publish transparent investment dashboards. Our third their third priority, the air connectivity for seamless travel, visa facilitation, and interregional mobility. Here are the deliverables is a G20 tourism report on air connectivity for seamless travel. The action on priority number 3, undertake route gap analysis to identify underserved markets, negotiate open skies and regional air agreements, create e-visa and visa on arrival corridors. As Solani already mentioned, there are many, many countries in Africa, for instance, that have very difficult visa regulations, which really have a massive impact on sabotage even tourism into their country. The next action would be an upgrade secondary hubs and airports, scale sustainable aviation fuels and green airport initiatives, advocate for mutual recognition of self-determination-based legal gender documents for transgender, gender diverse, or intersex persons, and mandatory skills development and training on air travel accessibility. Their priority number 4, enhanced resilience for inclusive sustainable tourism development. The deliverable would be an action plan on tourism resilience, and the actions in detail that we recommend are to conduct national risk resilience audits of the tourism sector, develop early warning systems and emergency protocols for destinations, retrofit tourism infrastructure with climate smart standards, establish inclusive recovery funds for MSMEs, promote domestic tourism development and niche tourism, for LGBTQI plus and persons with disabilities tourism experiences as a resilience strategy, to integrate resilience indicators into tourism satellite accounts, and developing code of ethics and inclusivity to address safety risks for LGBTQI plus travelers. And our these are our the 4 priorities, or not their 4 priorities of the G20 Tourism Working Group. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Yes, we as the G20 Tourism Working Group have identified another priority called priority 5, which is we named culture, climate, and communities towards regenerative and responsible tourism. This is our 5th priority, is outlined in the issue analysis. It is very important because it addresses the gaps left by traditional tourism models. It ensures that communities, especially indigenous people and marginalized groups, share in the benefits of tourism while also safeguarding cultural heritage and tackling climate risks. By linking tourism to equality, resilience, and regeneration, it transforms the sector into a driver of inclusive growth, social stability, and environmental sustainability, making it central to the G20's vision for solidarity, inequality, and sustainability. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. We have now 4 thematic tourism clusters. Our tourism clusters. I think this is slide number 7. Am I right? Just for me to get my orientation here on my plan. Yeah. So tourism can only be sustainable if it regenerates communities, protects heritage, and strengthens resilience to climate change. While the 4 existing G20 priorities address technology, investment, connectivity, and resilience, priority 5 fills a critical gap, ensuring that tourism delivers equitable benefits, safeguarding cultural ecosystems, and empowers those most often excluded: indigenous people, local communities, women, youth, LGBTQI+, and rural communities. The 4 priorities proposed by the South African government are important, but primarily focus on systems, infrastructure, and markets. What they miss is the human and community dimension of tourism, the very factor that ensures tourism is sustainable, inclusive, and socially legitimate. This framing makes priority 5 not just additional, but in our opinion, essential. It grounds the other priorities in social legitimacy, equity, and climate responsibility. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. We, as we mentioned, we have split our the priorities into clusters. We have 4 clusters for priority number 5, which is climate resilience, building carbon neutral tourism systems, cut emissions, strengthen climate risk screening, and climate smart infrastructure. We have the problems. Yeah, the tourism generates about 8% of global emissions. Infrastructure is vulnerable to climate shocks, limited SAF uptake, and poor climate screening. Why is it important? Without decarbonization, G20 risks missing 2030 to 2050 climate goals as it face growing disaster losses. So we feel that cluster number 1, climate resilience, is a very important element in the priorities. And we also identified some case studies here where which Nandi will address a little bit later. So next slide, please. Cluster number 2. Cluster number 2, heritage protection, safeguarding culture and indigenous rights. The problem, cultural heritage sites face over-tourism, underfunding, and I think that is one of the biggest problems from my personal experience, exclusion of indigenous or local voices. They are left out in the decision-making around, for instance, World Heritage Sites. So why it matters? Without FPIC, and I am very happy to explain what the acronym means. FPIC stands for Free, Prior, and Informed Consent, which is an indigenous, it identifies indigenous and local community rights in heritage tourism decisions. So here we have, without FPIC and co-management, heritage sites degrade, communities lose rights, and benefits leak out. We have our illustrated responses should be to co-manage heritage programs, heritage-linked apprenticeship, FPIC safeguards should be embedded in law. So please, the next slide, cluster number 3. Thank you. Cluster number 3 speaks about community empowerment and turning World Heritage Sites into livelihood hubs. The problem is that heritage sites concentrate visitors, leaving nearby communities excluded, even financially, but also some of them even lose their livelihoods when they are based close to a heritage site. MSMEs lack access to finance, branding, and markets. Why it matters? Here is a missed chance to turn heritage into inclusive economic hubs. Over-tourism worsens without community benefit sharing. We have some very good examples here in Machu Picchu, where over-tourism creates a massive, massive problem for the World Heritage Site. And another example, which I have experienced myself while I was attending a UNWTO conference, Angkor Wat, where communities next door to this heritage site, which earns millions per month, the communities are collecting the glass left over by tourism just to get a livelihood. This has to change. So now we have cluster number 4. Please change to, yeah, and I'm sorry, please go back. Can you go back one slide, please, cluster number 3. Yeah, we also mentioned here the Ancient Trade Route Program. This program was identified in 2007 under the South African presidency, where the UNESCO World Heritage Site Mapungubwe here in South Africa was identified as the key anchor project in partnership, as Mapungubwe is a tree, is bordering 2 other countries, Botswana and Zimbabwe. It was it's a transfrontier park, so it was in conjunction with the countries, neighborhood countries, to develop tourism there and to make these hubs a kind of a center for the ancient trade routes which happened all over Africa with many of the other G20 countries. I would like just to mention China here, which developed the Silk Route, and there is already a Silk Route program developed by the UNESCO for the World Heritage Sites. And this Silk Route program, we would like to see to be extended into many more other trade routes, like the Trans-Saharan trade route, the Monomotapa Indian Ocean trade route. And so there are so many ideas that were developed in this time, which have not been taken further. So now, next slide, please. Cluster number 4. So we have cluster number 4, governance and inclusion, embedding equity, ethics, and participation. The problems are that tourism often exclude women, youth, and persons with disability. Ethical standards remain voluntary, and MSMEs face precarious work. So we would, yeah?
Let me forward this.
Hello?
You can carry on, Doris.
Okay, sorry. Why it matters? Inequitable tourism weakens legitimacy, fuels backlash, and leaves communities vulnerable in crisis. So we would like to see also again more inclusion of women, youth, the LGBTQI plus, and the PWDs.
Ayanda, can we mute the participant?
It's Sbongile. Please mute yourself, Sbongile.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me just repeat the problem: the exclusion of women, youth, LGBTQI plus, PWDs. I would like to explain this. It is the persons with disabilities, and weak ethics. Weak ethics, which means, for instance, to employ children in tourism, underpayment. The UNILO is very much focusing on the, I think it's Sustainable Tourism Development Goal number 8, where they look into ethics in tourism and labor ethics, specifically in tourism. So the deliverables. DEIB, I would also like to explain DEIB for those who don't know. It stands for Diversity, Equality, Inclusion, and Belonging, and is a framework for accessibility and inclusion in destinations and governance. And accessibility standards, so we need standards for the DEIB and accessibility, and climate resilience, a climate resilience fund, and regenerative certifications. So next slide, please. I think now I can hand over to my colleague, Nandi. Nandi, it's your turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doris. Continuing with Priority 5, we recognize that the African Union, as well as the African Union Development Agency, have a role to play. If we are to ensure the implementation and continental ownership of Priority 5, the African Union, as well as NEPAD, must be central partners. This requires policy alignment by embedding regenerative tourism into the AU's Agenda 2063, into NEPAD's frameworks on infrastructure, and the African Continental Free Trade Area tourism protocols. The AU can also drive air and land connectivity through the Single African Air Transport Market and African Union mobility frameworks. The role of the African Union also includes coordinating the development of the ancient trade routes and transboundary cultural landscapes as tools for community empowerment, heritage safeguarding, and MSME incubation. The AU can also play a role in mobilizing the African Development Bank and NEPAD's infrastructure financing windows to channel investment into climate resilient and community-driven tourism. We also call on the AU to scale NEPAD's programs on rural development, youth empowerment, and women in entrepreneurship to strengthen community-led tourism enterprises. By placing the AU and NEPAD at the center of implementation, Priority 5 will not only empower African communities, but also serve as a model for global South cooperation and regenerative tourism. We also recognize that Priority 5 has cross-cutting outcomes, which include economic outcome, which is the increased investment in community-led MSMEs and fairer revenue sharing. The social outcome includes empowered women, youth, indigenous groups, and marginalized groups such as the LGBTQI and persons with disabilities. The cultural outcome speaks to safeguarded heritage and revitalized and creative industries. When we look at the environmental outcome, it speaks to lower emissions, climate resilient infrastructure, and reduced over-tourism. And finally, the political outcome speaks to greater legitimacy of the G20 tourism leadership and alignment with the SDGs and global goals, as Doris has spoken to. So our call to action is that the Priority 5 must be endorsed alongside the existing 4 G20 priorities. As Doris has spoken and presented a case on what is missing from the existing 4, which we support, but that Priority 5, which speaks to the human element, must also be endorsed. We also seek that we position the AU and NEPAD as strategic partners, and that there is that the annual progress reporting and accountability is mandated. There are a number of case studies that present a case on the success of what we have spoken to in Priority 5. We look at the Kingdom of Bhutan, which is in South Asia, which is one of 2 countries that has achieved a status of being carbon negative. So this model is one that can be followed. We also consider the Bulungula Lodge in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, which speaks to sustainable community tourism, where the lodge is 100% community owned and the women and the youth are empowered through these initiatives. We also speak to the UNESCO World Heritage Sites co-management models, which present a case on how the World Heritage Sites can benefit communities. There's also the United Nations World Tourism Best Tourism Villages, where countries such as Ethiopia, Lebanon, and Chile have participated, and most recently South Africa as well. And then there's the UNESCO World Heritage Sites Ancient Trade Route model, which is based on the Silk Route model. And all of these case studies present an illustration of how Priority 5 can be achieved. The next steps include the adoption of the policy framework, and this can happen as soon as this year. This is followed by the launch of the World Heritage Sites Compacts and Asian Trade Routes Program, and this can take place in 2026, followed by the AU and UNESCO partnership, which can be operationalized from 2026 to 2027. And then finally, the full integration of regenerative and inclusive tourism pathways, and this can be achieved by the year 2030. With that, I thank you, and I am going to stop sharing so that we can take your questions. Are there any questions? Nobile, you can go
Nobile.
ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think what I have, it's partially can be questions, partially can be something that you need to look into it. Yeah. One, I would like to welcome your presentation. It was very, very good and eye-opener in terms of the tourism. We know tourism is one of the best thing that we need to invest on it in terms of ensuring that people do come to Africa, come to South Africa, and come to Africa to see the beautiful nature of Africa. But there's a few things that I want to speak about. One is the issue of how do we improve the health risk for people who are coming to visit Africa or South Africa. As we know that we are having about yellow fever, we are having the Ebola, the COVID, the HIV and AIDS and so forth. These are the things that we also need to look at it, to say those who are coming to South Africa or are coming to Africa, they do get vaccinated for that. I remember when I went to Tanzania, I had to do the yellow fever. I had to have a yellow fever card to be able to enter Tanzania and able also to departure from Tanzania, because without that, I was not going to be allowed to have it. But we need to improve the issues related to health risk, because there are many health risks that we are experiencing in Africa, including the malaria. It's one of the health risks that we are really, really having in Africa, to address those issues. And also the other thing is the issue that relates to safety and security. There are many safety and concerns that need to be addressed. And if you look in the last year in South Africa, about 26,000 murderers of people who were tourists happened, and about 1.5 house breakings happened to those who were visited the country or people who were coming to the country. So these are some of the things that we need to look at in terms of how do we address the issue of safety and security for people who are visiting our countries in Africa. I know when you visit, if I'm especially if I'm in DRC, DRC in Congo, I don't feel comfortable or I don't feel safe because of the soldiers around and everything and so forth. We need to speak about the issues of safety and security about that. Another thing that I think we need to look at, I think. Tulane spoke about it around issues of visa. We need to reform visa with the Home Affairs. We need to engage on that. If you travel around Europe, in Europe it's easy to travel from one country to another, but in Africa we have to get visa for other countries to visit some of the countries in Africa. Especially if I'm here in South Africa, I want to move to Botswana, I need to have a visa and so forth. These are some of the most things, and most of the visa are very expensive to acquire it, especially even if you go to America, you have to pay a lot of money to access that visa. And also the other issue that need to be addressed are the direct flights. I think we need to speak with the agencies that are responsible for flights. If you fly, it's like when I'm flying from here to Kenya, I had to fly from South Africa to Sweden, from Sweden back to Kenya. I will pass Kenya and then I will come back to Kenya. If I'm going to some countries, I have to go via Dubai instead of having direct flights. These are some of the things that we need to look at. And also part of the things that we need to look at is the hosting global events. We need to host global events. The more we host global events, I think we need to give people an idea to look at what is Africa, how beautiful Africa is. As we know that South Africa is trying, but we need also other countries in Africa to try to host global events. We are soon and very soon, I think around 2027, South Africa will be hosting Formula One. We're hosting G20 now. We've hosted 2010 FIFA World Cup, we've hosted the Rugby World Cup. So we need to keep on improving in terms of hosting this big event so that we attract more people to come to South Africa. I've seen countries like Rwanda working with soccer teams, especially the English Premier League. If you look at the Arsenal, on their logo, one of the part of the sponsors is Rwanda, where they said visit Rwanda. We need in South Africa also to team up with some football teams, because we know that football teams, they've got millions and millions of supporters across the globe, and we need to do that to attract more people. And also, we need to improve the digital systems in terms of people who are entering the country and people who are leaving the country, so that we know who's in the country and who's not in the country. On that note, it's all. Thank you and over.
So thank you very much. Because you've asked many questions, let's rather take the opportunity to deal with this, and then we'll open the next round for questions before we lose track. If you had asked two questions, we would have invited others to ask their questions. So let's take this opportunity, colleagues, to respond to the questions as well as comments that have been made. My colleagues, Nandi and Doris, I'm happy to go through some of these questions where I can make some comments and add value, but you feel very comfortable to augment on those points where you think I may not have adequately covered the issues. Let me start with the
Solari, may I come in with the topic of health? I would like to respond to this point.
Okay, take that one, because it was the first question which was raised.
Yes, thank you so much. First, I would like to say that you, Mr. May I just check what is your name? Nkobile, right? You brought up the questions. Was it Nkobile?
It was Nkobile.
Yeah. Very good points. And I would like to address this topic of health, as I was not only also the initiator, but I was a team member of a think tank called Project Hope. It was developed during COVID, during the COVID pandemic, where we as African Tourism Board at this time initiated to invited all the stakeholders in the tourism industry to discuss how can we deal with health matters when it comes to tourism. And we even had minister round tables, and the outcome, we even had our WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, in our team. And the outcome was this safer travel label. Maybe you have seen it. When you travel, you see it in hotels at the entrance door. You see it in brochures. It shows that an accommodation, a guest house, a hotel, that they care and that they take special steps to make sure that their enterprise is safe for travelers. Well, you also addressed this is no more or less for the COVID pandemic, but as you also mentioned, we have many, many other more health issues on the continent, which should not be overexposed, because we don't want to scare people. We don't have Ebola in South Africa, for instance. When I travel into a country with Ebola, obviously this country has to address and has to tell the visitors how they can protect themselves, has to ask for vaccination and so on. But for malaria, I think that is a matter that is addressed by all travel agencies, where they recommend to their visitors that they should speak to their general practitioners on how they can protect themselves when they come and travel to South Africa. I think each and every kind of health issue has its own steps to be taken, or security measures to be implemented. And I believe that due to COVID, people thought about this much more, and many of these health measures have been implemented already in most of the countries on the African continent. But I fully agree, and colleagues Tulani and Mandi, shall we adopt the health topic, health, and also the safety and security? I also agree on this point to add it to our priority number 5. I would be very happy to do so. Tulani, what do you think?
Yes, I think issues of health. I'll talk to the safety and security now. We will edit when we do our draft for submission. But I do want to highlight the fact that there are the United Nations World Health Organization protocols which governs across the globe how certain pandemics and outbreaks are treated. And we have seen the example of COVID-19 that you have alluded to. So health has become immediately top of the hygiene factors, if you like, for people to travel to different destinations. It is not just an African problem. I want to emphasize that. It is not just an African problem. But the problem with Africa has been the fact that people don't seem to differentiate between countries and a continent. When something happens in Cameroon, it is seen as close to maybe Durban as it is like a taxi drive to Durban between these two countries. And that brings me to a very important thing that we must try and manage as the African country. And generally, because some people somewhere in the world have no geographic concept of how Africa is structured, we are seen as one country rather than a continent. So it is important for us that we support each other in managing some of the tourism sensitive issues such as the health related matters. It is the same as security. The point has been made about safety and security, and as well as malaria vaccination for malaria as an example in the health space. What we must be careful of, and I think the travel agency and the tour operators environment have already dealt with this, but I want to put it as a caution for all of us. We must stay away from talking about malaria as a safety thing for one country against the other. Because in doing so, we could negatively be selling the continent. The continent has to have protocols which are governed under the African unity, which says all health-related issues will be treated as follows, and we all abide by that. But the minute I start saying in Gauteng is malaria-free, and I might imply that the Western Cape is not safe. So, and then it goes to the continent as well. Safety and security. Nandi, I did not ask you which topics or which questions you want to respond to. Maybe I should give you an opportunity to pick what you want to talk to, and then I'll deal with the rest.
No, Tulani, you can carry on. Mine was really just to make a point that, it's not so much that nothing is being done in terms of safety and security. When we look at, for instance, recently the Minister of Tourism having appointed a number of unemployed youth to work in the different key tourism sites as to assist in the policing. There's a formal name for them. It just escapes my mind right now.
It's
But
called tourism monitors.
Yes, the tourism monitors. So there is things being done, and the Unmobile mentioned that there are some countries, war-torn countries, where as a traveler you should exercise caution, but where the presence of those soldiers in themselves, are actually should be creating safety and not fear. So there are things that are being done by the various countries. It's not so much that nothing is being done, because we mentioned in the beginning, and it is known that tourism is a big driver in terms of job creation, etc. And it contributes to the economy, and there are things being done in these areas. And then lastly, I did want to just side note mention that South Africa did try and put forward a presentation of partnering with the Premier League, and that was widely reported, and why it was not supported in South Africa, related to costs, etc. So again, to that point, I think that was something that was well ventilated between the Minister, SA Tourism, and the public. Why we are not supporting, as South Africa, the Premier League, but perhaps we could look at more local partnerships, versus looking at where and look at the cost benefit when it comes to partnering, with the soccer. But we also now have the golf, live golf, that is coming to Johannesburg next year. That is again supporting, tourism is partnering with that, and they're supporting that tournament. So that sporting event being hosted in South Africa, and as well as what the work that is being done to try and bring Formula One into the country as well. So there are initiatives in place, and the industry is working to do this, and not just in South Africa, but across the globe. That was just my contribution to Lani, but you can carry on.
I just want to make this statement as an observation as well, because Gria is going to come in and give us some directions in terms of what is it that we are trying to develop now. We have presented the 5 priorities, and this represents our draft policy recommendation to the G20. Most of the issues that Mobile has touched on are already existing somewhere in the tourism space, the G20, the African Union. So we are simply indicating whether, in terms of the work that we are doing now, has included this in one way or the other, or is it reflecting in other working groups within the C20 space? And we have touched on that. So on the safety and security issues, again, we need to be very careful about how we do this. It is very important. It affects tourism. If if the place is considered to be unsafe, much as we may have heritage sites, we may have cultural experiences, and all those kind of things that we have spoken about. We want to spread the economic benefits of tourism, but for as long as the facilities are located in places that are considered to be unsafe, there will be no progress. But it is also predicated in the sense that for as long as this exclusivity of tourism and excluding communities where these facilities reside, for as long as we're talking tourism as an elitist exercise to the exclusion of the communities, what Doris spoke to, it is not going to work. So the answer to safety and security, we believe, to a certain extent, lies in the communities sharing the economic benefits of tourism, communities getting involved, the marginalized communities also getting involved. What Doris gave as an example of a very high-end facility generating billions of dollars in a day, and the communities only have to pick up bottles after the tourists have experienced their pleasure, it's not involving communities. So we will not be able to deal with this safety and security issue that way. The last point about security is there are no countries that can take an advertising billboard or go on an electronic campaign TV and say we are a very safe country. It is a very risky thing. Those of us who have traveled around the world will know that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there is a certain element of risk in every country. The visa facilitation and cost has become a bit of a problem. And to enhance tourism, we have seen experiences in different countries where either e-visas have been introduced or visa on arrival is being issued or a visa-free kind of environment has immediately enhanced tourism. The problem sometimes is a coordination between the left hand and the right hand, not knowing what's happening. There is a Department of Economic Development or commercial side which sees visa facilitation or as a revenue generating facility that can happen at the cost of or at the expense of tourism in that particular country. So the agitation that we're presenting here is one where we are saying we must see this as a country in a holistic manner where visa facilitation leads to economic stimulation as well as job creation, and it should not be done at the expense of tourism. Air connectivity definitely has been the Achilles heel for South Africa, for African countries. Yes, Ngobile, you are correct in the example that you are giving, that sometimes it is easy to travel to Europe and then connect and come back to the African continent, even if it was easier for you to go to Ethiopia, but you have to go via some parts of Europe to get air connectivity. The problem that we have experienced until now is the fact that there is a lot of protectionism of national airlines, even those with one aeroplane, they still want to host the national flag. So I've made reference to the Yamoussoukro Declaration, which is probably somewhere like 20 years old, with the intention of creating borderless connections, but it has not happened until now because they move one step forward and a few steps backwards, continually wanting to protect a national carrier that does not exist, that is not even viable. We will have, when we're talking about the visa facilitation, the trans-border of animals has long been facilitated, and animals are roaming freely across the African country. Yet the people who facilitated that, they themselves still have to carry visas and so on and so on, crossing borders in conditions that are made very, very difficult. The hosting of global events is a very important exercise to look at, Mobile. It comes with two kinds of benefits. One is, let's use South Africa as an example. When we hosted the 2010 World Cup, this has given us an opportunity without buying a billboard and a commercial advert to tell people that South Africa is safe or Africa is safe to visit. You'll, most of you will recall that during the Soccer World Cup in South Africa, we pretty much had a zero tourism incidents that happened in this country. And people lived to tell the story. A lot of them visited Soweto and came back alive. Some did not even want to return because they were enjoying it there. So a global hosting of events is a very important platform which provides a country with an immense opportunity to showcase its tourism spectacle, at the same time dealing with the issue of safety and security without pronouncing it. It showcases your various tourism experiences. Now, the issue is that we all have to be able to host global events. We must keep in mind that we are competing with other countries, other continents. So it is therefore important that we understand and tick the boxes for the various elements that need to be met for us to win these events. So there are certain things that need to be done. You must have a national convention bureau. You must have convention centers and facilities that can meet the standards for doing this. So what we have done in South Africa in the past is to make sure that we do not become the only successful country to host events. We need to raise the standards so that other countries as well can help in the African continent that is seen as a country to successfully host events, a share of international events as an African continent first, before we even think of countries in within Africa. So it is important, but it calls for an investment by governments, by the private sector, so that we meet all of this. I think in terms of the digital space, which is one of our priority, one of the 5 priorities that we have identified here, it has become imperative that today you cannot be a player in the tourism space without understanding where artificial intelligence takes you, where technology holistically takes you. That is already covered. It may well be a question of detail in terms of how we want to do it, but we think we are sufficiently covered in this respect. I think if we can stop here, we are not necessarily giving you the holistic answer. We will sift through this when we finish this conversation. And with the guidance of Gria, we will see whether some of the points raised here belong to the tourism working group or they are covered elsewhere. But as a tourism working group, we think the health risks are adequately covered. Safety and security is implied, but is covered elsewhere. Visa facilitation, we have already covered that. Air connectivity, we have covered that. And hosting global events is the only one that was new. Digital embracement of digital technology, we think we are covered in that respect. And Mobile, I hope we have covered most of your questions. Let's take the next question, please. If there's anybody who wants to raise a question, I'm looking at the screen to see if there are hands up. I don't see any hands yet. Just checking with my colleagues in terms of what I have quickly gone through. Is there any other thing you may want to add on the points that have been raised?
Nothing to add on my side, Tulani. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nandi. Yes. Are there any further questions, colleagues? It doesn't seem like there are further questions. We have Gria in the room. I don't know how you would want us to conclude, but we appreciate Mobile's contribution. Maybe we can check on the chats, colleagues, if there are any questions that have been typed there. I don't see anything.
No, there are no questions. I've been monitoring the chat. Thank you.
Gria, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for the presentation, David, and the points also that were raised by Mbile. So when I look at the policy briefs across all of the different working groups, I think that you do raise a salient point that some of those things one may want to look at whether there is effective coverage under equitable health for all. But what we have seen that there's certainly an interconnectedness of issues. So I think as we have done within other groups, is certainly just to keep an eye out to make sure that we do flag it, to make sure that it's captured within the other working groups, or at least that the attention has been brought. But I think within the framing of what it is that the tourism working group is seeking to achieve and the points that you're putting forward, I think that those have been addressed quite effectively within the policy brief. And so one can always just share those additional considerations as were brought forward now that has been coming across as we've been walking through these different engagements. So that's why it's also quite helpful to get these kinds of reflections, as much as, yes, it is linked to an observation that people experience in the context of the tourism sector. I think that you're quite right. We've got those 14 thematic working groups, and then to see how some of that may also just be considered as integrated within the approaches. In terms, I think, just in terms of the conference and the eventing, I think that one does still find more home by within your working group. But again, I think a lot of the work that we've seen the working groups trying to do over the last month is to distill and decide on the key issues. And I know there's been a lot of battles and negotiations around that. So when it comes to that broadly, one is guided by yourselves, as we know that you have been engaging with your various constituencies, and that which you've decided to put as your core issues is then reflective of that joint consultation and negotiations that have taken place. So very much we still stand to be guided by you, and take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Priya. And are we now at a point where we can, Ayanda, are we now at a point where we are saying the tourism working group number 8 has done its presentation, and attendees have raised questions and given us comments which we are happy with. Greer has also commented on this, and therefore that can bring us to the end of our presentation. Ayanda? I don't know if Ayanda, are you muted or temporarily away from your desk? I want to make a call to say we are done with our presentation. Joris?
Yes, thank you so much, Tulani. And thank you, and looking forward to future collaborations.
Andy, your closing remarks?
No, thank you so much for the session, and thank you for the participation. And if you're in our working group, you can continue to ask questions there, and we will be sharing documents in that working group as well. Thank you.
Well, if Ayanda is back, she can interrupt me, but I'm just about to declare the session closed. Colleagues, it is important that as we present the tourism working group priorities, we keep in mind that Africa is still struggling to get even 5% of the global tourism opportunities. The tourists coming to Africa have been hovering below that number. Maybe the points that Mobile has raised are the reason why we have not done very well. It takes a whole lot of the continent to realize that if we don't get it right together, we will perish together in this instance. But the benefits of tourism are huge. We started off by indicating that it creates economic and job opportunities. It is true. That's what tourism does if it is properly implemented. So with this, and in the absence of Ayanda interrupting me, I would like to declare the webinar for the Tourism Working Group number 8 closed. Thank you very much for your attendance. And thanks to my colleagues for putting together the presentation and for a very well-structured presentation. Thanks to both of you. The session, Ogria? Yes, I see you wanted to say something. Please,
No,
anytime.
no, Chair. I just wanted to thank you for the session, and also just to note that, Ayanda has also just indicated that it's for you to end. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you, and goodbye to you all.
Thank you, Tiladi. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nandi.
Thank you. Bye.